She was standing at the well when I rode in, and I almost fell clean off my horse. Not because I was tired, though Lord knows I was. 3 weeks on a dusty trail with nothing but hardtack and regret for company. No, I nearly fell, because she was the most beautiful woman I had laid eyes on since I left Missouri, and maybe the most beautiful woman I had ever seen in my entire life. I had ridden through 7 territories, slept under more cold stars than I could count, and I had never once thought to stop. Then I saw Eliza Pruitt, and every reason I had ever had to keep moving just dried up like a creek bed in August. I made a joke, the kind of stupid thing a man says when he doesn't know what else to do with himself. I tipped my hat and said, "Ma'am, I reckon you must be the prettiest woman in the whole Wild West." I expected a blush, maybe a polite laugh, maybe a door closed in my face. What I did not expect was for her green eyes to look straight through me the way they did, steady and serious and carrying something heavy inside them. And for her to say, plain as the noon sun, "You want to go out with me, stranger?" I have thought about that moment every single day since. My name is Cole Walker. I was 31 years old that autumn of 1883, and I'd been drifting for 4 years, ever since the war with my brother over our father's land ended with me on the losing side and the open road on the winning one. I was not an outlaw, though I had ridden close enough to that line to feel its heat. I was not a rancher, though I had done enough ranch work to know the difference between a good fence and a bad one. I was what the frontier called a drifter, a man without roots, without a plan, and, if I was being honest with myself, without much hope of finding either. The Pruitt Ranch sat at the edge of the Wyoming plains, pressed up against a long ridge of red rock that turned gold in the evenings and black at night. It was the kind of place that looked like it had been there forever and would outlast everything around it. 300 acres of hard-won grass, a solid barn, a main house with 2 chimneys, and a bunkhouse that sat empty. Raymond Pruitt had built all of it with his own 2 hands over 15 years, and he wore that fact on his face, the way some men wear their pride. Heavy and without much joy. I had not planned to stop at the Pruitt place at all. I was following a line of fence west, looking for the town of Callan, where I'd heard there was work driving cattle north before the first freeze hit. But my horse threw a shoe 2 miles back, and the Pruitt gate was the first thing I saw when I came over the ridge on foot, leading the animal through the afternoon heat. If you enjoy stories like this one, tales of the Old West, of love found in the wrong places in the right moments, go ahead and subscribe to the channel right now. Leave a comment telling us what city you're watching from. We'll leave a little heart on every single one. Now, back to Cole and Eliza. She was still looking at me when I found my voice again. "I beg your pardon, ma'am," I said, because maybe I had heard wrong. Maybe the heat had gotten to me. But she didn't repeat herself right away. She set the bucket down by the well with a quiet clank of metal against stone, and she dried her hands on her apron, the slow, deliberate way a person does when they're buying themselves a moment to think. She was tall for a woman, and she carried herself straight, the way people do when they've been standing up against hard things for a long time. Her hair was the color of autumn wheat, pulled back but with strands escaping around her face in the afternoon breeze. Her eyes, those green eyes, were the kind that seemed to be looking at something just past you, something you couldn't turn around fast enough to see. "You heard me," she said finally, and there was no coyness in it. No game, just a quiet, clear statement from a woman who had clearly made some kind of decision before I ever arrived. I looked around the property the way a man does when he's trying to figure out if he's walking into trouble. The barn was shut. The bunkhouse was empty. There was no sound from the main house. "Is your husband home, ma'am?" I asked. Something moved across her face. Not quite sadness, not quite relief. more like the look of a woman who has asked herself that same question many times and stopped expecting a simple answer. "He rode to Callan 3 days ago," she said. "He'll be back end of the week." I stood there in the dust with my lame horse, and my better judgment telling me to thank her kindly, find a rock to sit on, and wait for Raymond Pruitt to come home before I had any conversation with his wife that lasted longer than 30 seconds. But there was something in the way she was looking at me. Not with desire, not with mischief, but with the particular loneliness of a person who has been alone so long they have almost forgotten what it feels like to be seen. "What did you mean?" I said slowly, "when you asked if I wanted to go out with you?" She almost smiled. Almost. "I meant out to the east pasture," she said. "I've got a section of fence down and 3 steers that found the gap this morning. I've been trying to drive them back all day on my own, and I can't do it. I need another pair of hands." I'll be damned if I didn't feel the fool right then. I stood there in the blazing Wyoming sun and felt the red climb up from my collar to my ears, and I said, "Much obliged, ma'am. I'd be glad to help." She looked at me for one more second with those eyes that saw too much, and I could have sworn there was the ghost of a laugh somewhere behind them. Then she turned and said, "Your horse needs water first. Bring him around to the trough." That was how it started. Her name, I learned over the next hour as we worked the east fence line together, was Eliza May Pruitt, née Calloway. She had come to Wyoming from Tennessee at the age of 22, following Raymond Pruitt, who had been her father's business partner, and a man of 38, who had seemed, at the time, like the most solid thing in a world that had just finished falling apart around her family. That was 9 years ago. She was 31 now, same as me, and she had the quiet endurance of a woman who had spent nearly a decade making peace with the distance between what she had expected and what she had gotten. And she didn't tell me any of that outright, of course. People out there didn't talk straight about the hard things. Not to strangers. Not on the first day. What she told me was practical. Where the fence was down, why the steers had bolted, what the terrain was like on the far side of the ridge. But the things she didn't say filled in the spaces between her words, the way cold air fills a room when someone opens a door. We got the steers back before sundown. It took 2 hours of patient work, circling wide, moving slow, reading the animals the way you have to when you don't want to spook them further. She was good at it. Better than good. She knew that land like she had grown up on it. Knew which draws the cattle liked and which slopes they avoided. Knew where the grass was thick and where the ground dropped away. And she didn't need me for the knowledge. She needed me for the extra pair of hands. When we got the last steer through the temporary gate she'd rigged with rope and cedar posts, she let out a long breath and pushed a strand of hair out of her face. The sun was dropping fast behind the red ridge, and the air was already carrying the first cold edge of the coming night. "I appreciate your help, mister." She stopped. "I don't know your name." "Cole," I said. "Cole Walker." She nodded once, the way people do out there when they're filing information away. "Mr. Walker, I appreciate it. You're welcome to water and a meal before you move on." I should have said no. I knew I should have said no. A married woman, alone on her property, and a man she'd met 3 hours ago. Every decent instinct I had was pointing at the trail and saying ride. My horse had a new shoe to find, and Callan was still 12 miles west, and the responsible thing was to keep moving. "I'd be grateful," I said. The kitchen of the Pruitt house was warm and smelled like wood smoke and dried herbs hanging from the rafters, sage and rosemary in bundles, the way frontier women preserved what the summer gave them against the long months of nothing ahead. She moved through that kitchen with the efficiency of someone who had done every task alone for so long that she no longer noticed the absence of help. She put coffee on without asking if I wanted any. She had a pot of beans already made, and she cut thick slices of cornbread from a pan on the counter and set the plate down in front of me like it cost her nothing. I sat at a table built for 4 and ate alone at one end, while she stood at the counter and ate at the other. And we talked about nothing important for a while. The weather coming in from the north, the price of beef in Cheyenne, the state of the trail I'd ridden in on. Safe talk, territory talk, the kind that lets 2 people share a room without getting too close to anything real. But then she said, out of nowhere, "How long have you been drifting?" 4 years, I said. She poured herself a cup of coffee and leaned against the counter. You like it? I thought about lying. It would have been easier. No, I said, but I'm better at it than I am at staying put. She looked at her cup. Some people are better at staying put than they should be, she said quietly. That was the moment I understood that the loneliness I had sensed in her was not the ordinary loneliness of distance, or of hard work, or of a quiet life. It was the specific, suffocating loneliness of a person who was surrounded by walls they had helped build and could no longer find the door in. I didn't say anything. I just let the silence sit there between us, and outside the window, the Wyoming dark pressed in from all sides, and the wind picked up and moved through the grass with a sound like breathing. Your husband, I said, finally, carefully. He been gone long? 3 days, she said. Like I told you. I meant, does he travel often? She set her cup down. Often enough, she said. That was all she gave me. I didn't push. There are doors a man doesn't knock on when he's a guest in someone else's house. And I knew where those doors were, even if I couldn't always say I'd respected them in the past. I thanked her for the meal. I told her I'd be on my way at first light. She showed me the bunkhouse without any ceremony. Clean blankets, a stove, a window that faced east. And she said goodnight the way a woman says it when she has said it to an empty room for a long time and has learned not to expect it to mean much. I lay awake for a long while in that bunkhouse, listening to the wind work itself up into something serious outside. And I thought about Eliza Calloway, who had become Eliza Pruitt. And I thought about the particular kind of courage it takes to build a life, and then realize, somewhere in the middle of it, that you built it wrong. By morning, the wind had become a genuine thing, not yet a blizzard, but carrying the promise of one, the way the sky carries the promise of rain before the clouds arrive. I went to the barn to saddle my horse and found the east fence had come down again in the night, the temporary gate I'd rigged with rope giving way under the pressure of a steer that had been working at it. 2 of the 3 cattle were gone again, farther this time, maybe a mile into the draw behind the Red Ridge. I went back to the house and knocked. She answered the door, already dressed, already awake, with a look on her face that said she had seen the gap in the fence from her bedroom window before I'd even risen. She had coffee ready. She handed me a cup without a word, and we went out into the cold together. It took most of the morning. The wind made it harder. The steers were agitated, turning circles in the draw. And every time we nearly had them, a gust would come through and scatter the work. We didn't talk much. There wasn't room for words in the middle of that kind of effort. And besides, by the second hour, something had shifted between us, in the way things shift between people who are working hard at the same thing. A kind of quiet understanding that doesn't need language, a rhythm that comes from moving in the same direction toward the same goal. When we finally got the cattle back and fixed the fence properly, cedar posts driven deep this time, wire strung tight, she sat down on a fallen log at the edge of the pasture, and I sat down beside her, and we both just breathed for a while. This wouldn't have happened if Raymond had been here, she said, but not with bitterness. More like she was noting a fact out loud, the way you note the weather. He worked the ranch alone mostly, I asked. He did, she said. Last 3 hands quit in the spring. He said he didn't need them. She paused. He doesn't like people around? I thought about the empty bunkhouse, about the table built for four, about the dried herbs in the kitchen and the coffee she had ready before I even knocked. "That include you?" I asked. It was too direct. I knew it when I said it. But she didn't flinch. She just looked out across the pasture with those steady green eyes and said, "Some days." The wind had died down by early afternoon, and the sky had gone the color of pewter, the specific flat gray that means the cold is settling in for real, not passing through. I fixed 3 other sections of fence I'd noticed were weak, while she worked in the garden, pulling the last of the autumn vegetables before the freeze hit the soil overnight. We worked in sight of each other, but separate, and when I glanced up now and then, I could see her moving through the rows, with her head bent and her shoulders set against the cold and the particular grace of someone who is used to beautiful things that cost a great deal. By late afternoon, I had made the decision I already knew I would make, which was to stay one more night. I told myself it was the fence. I told myself it was the weather coming in. I told myself all the things a man tells himself when the truth is simpler and less comfortable, which is that he is not ready to ride away from something that makes him feel less like a ghost. That evening she made supper, salt pork and boiled potatoes, and more cornbread. And this time, she sat at the same end of the table as me, close enough that I could hear her breathe when the room went quiet. We talked for a long time, not about safe things anymore, about Tennessee and Wyoming and the space between who you were and who you became on the road between them, about brothers and fathers and the particular weight of land, the way it gets into a person's blood whether they want it there or not. She talked about the first winter she spent in Wyoming, 1874, the bad one, when the snow came in October and didn't leave until April, and she had spent 6 months in a house the size of a wagon with a man who didn't know how to be inside anything that long without going cold himself. "I learned to read weather that winter," she said. "Not because I wanted to, because I had to know when it was safe to go outside." I didn't ask her what she meant by that exactly. I didn't need to. "What keeps you here?" I said instead. She thought about it for a long time, long enough that I thought she wasn't going to answer. Then she said, "The land." It sounds foolish, but the land isn't Raymond's fault. The land is just the land. It doesn't have any bad days. I understood that. More than she knew. We sat by the stove after supper, and she brought out a bottle of rye that had been mostly full when Raymond left, and was still mostly full now. And she poured 2 glasses, and we drank slowly. The way you drink when you're not trying to get anywhere, just trying to be somewhere for a while. The fire in the stove threw orange light across the kitchen walls, and the wind outside had gone quiet the way it does before snow starts. And everything in the world felt very far away, except for that kitchen and the woman sitting across from me, with her hands wrapped around her glass, and her eyes doing the thing they did where they looked at you and through you at the same time. "Tell me something true," she said. It was an odd thing to say. I sat with it for a moment. "I've been running," I said. "4 years. I told myself it was because there was nowhere to go back to. But I think the real reason is that I was scared of what would happen if I stopped and found out there was nothing inside me worth staying for." She was quiet. "That's a true thing," she said finally. "Your turn," I said. She looked at her glass. "I asked Raymond for a divorce 2 years ago," she said. "He said no. Out here that mostly means there's no lawyer for 60 miles. And no judge who'd take a woman's side over a man who owns 300 acres free and clear." She paused. "So I stayed, and I learned to be somewhere else in my head when I needed to be." I felt something tighten in my chest. Not quite anger, not quite grief. The particular ache of a world that builds cages for people and then tells them they should be grateful for the shelter. "I'm sorry," I said. "Don't be," she said. I'm telling you because you told me something true, not because I need you to fix it. That stopped me, because it was the most honest thing anyone had said to me in 4 years of drifting, and it landed somewhere I wasn't prepared for it to land. I looked at her across the table, and she looked back at me, and in the quiet between us was everything that couldn't be said and shouldn't be said, and that we both understood without either of us having to say it. That if the world were arranged differently, if we had met on a different road, if the fences were drawn in different places, something between us might have been possible that wasn't possible now. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled slowly. I'll finish the north fence line tomorrow morning, I said, before I ride out. She nodded. I appreciate it. And I'll ask in Callan if there's a hand looking for steady work. Send someone your way if I find one. She nodded again, and there was something in her face. Gratitude, maybe, or something quieter and harder to name. And she said, "You're a good man, Cole Walker." "I'm trying to be," I said. No, and I meant it more than I'd meant anything in a long time. I went back to the bunkhouse, and I lay down in the dark, and I listened to the first snow of the season begin to fall outside. Quiet and steady, covering everything. And I thought about the kind of courage it takes to live an honest life when the world keeps giving you reasons not to. I thought about Eliza Pruitt in her kitchen, with her rye and her green eyes, and her 9 years of staying put when she should have been able to go. I thought about what she had said, that she was telling me because I told her something true, not because she needed me to fix it. And I thought that might be the most dignified thing I had ever heard a person say. Before we get to the end of this story, if you've made it this far, go ahead and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment right now telling us what city you're watching from. We love seeing where our listeners are, and we drop a little heart on every comment. Now, let's finish this. In the morning, the snow was 2 inches deep and still coming down soft, and the world was white and quiet in every direction. I was up before dawn, and I worked the north fence line until mid-morning, driving posts and stringing wire in the cold until the section was sound and tight. When I came back to the barn to put the tools away, she was there with a cup of coffee and a biscuit wrapped in cloth, and she handed them to me without ceremony, and I ate standing up in the barn doorway while the snow fell outside. "North line's done," I said. "That'll hold through the winter if nobody leans on it stupid." "Thank you," she said, and then, after a beat, "Cole." First time she'd used my name without the mister. It shouldn't have mattered. It mattered. I looked at her. She was standing in the middle of the barn with the morning light coming through the gap in the door and landing across her face and her hair, and she looked, for just a moment, like a painting of something that was supposed to be beautiful, and was, completely, honestly, without any performance in it. "I know you're riding out," she said. "I just wanted to say, you came along when I needed a pair of hands, and you gave me more than that. You gave me a conversation that treated me like I was worth talking to. That counts for more than you probably know." I held the coffee cup in both hands, and I looked at her, and I said, "For what it's worth, and I know it ain't worth much, practically speaking, you are the prettiest woman in the Wild West." I said it as a joke when I wrote in. I don't take it back. She looked at me for a long moment, and then she smiled. A real one, not the ghost of one. And it was the kind of smile that changes the temperature of a room, the kind that takes years to earn back once life takes it away. And I was glad to have seen it, even if it wasn't mine to keep. "Get going before the trail ice is over," she said. "And don't forget to send that ranch hand." I saddled my horse and led him out into the snow. She stood in the barn doorway and watched me go without waving, which was the right thing to do. I didn't look back more than once. That was also the right thing to do. I found Callan 6 hours later, cold, and carrying something in my chest that hadn't been there 3 days before. Not quite hope, not quite peace, but something in the neighborhood of both. The beginning of a man who was done running. I asked around the saloon about ranch hands looking for work. Found a young fellow named Jed Hollis, 24, honest eyes, good with animals, looking for steady winter work within a day's ride. I told him about the Pruitt place, told him the woman running it was capable and fair, and the pay would be honest. I did not tell him anything else. He rode out the next morning. I stayed in Callan through the first blizzard, waiting for the trail north to clear. On the third day, the sky went the hard, bright blue that Wyoming does in winter. I saddled up and pointed north, and I rode out through the white country with the cold in my lungs, and something settled in my heart that I hadn't felt in 4 long years. I have thought about Eliza Pruitt many times since that autumn of 1883. I have wondered what became of her, whether Raymond came back from Callan different or the same, whether Jed Hollis turned out to be the pair of hands she needed, whether she found the door in those walls eventually and walked through it into something better. I think she did. I don't know why I think that. I just do. What I know for certain is this. Sometimes, a man rides into a place with a broken horse and a stupid joke, and he rides out 3 days later with something he didn't have before. Not a woman, not a claim, not anything he can put in a saddlebag. Just the knowledge that he is capable of being decent when it would have been easier not to be. That the world can put the wrong 2 people in the right place at the right time, and both of them can do the honorable thing and still walk away carrying something real. The Wild West was full of men who took what they wanted and called it living. Out there on the Pruitt Ranch, in the cold, and the fence work, and the lamplight, and the honest words, I got a glimpse of what it felt like to be something else. I reckon that's worth more than most things I've carried. The snow kept falling behind me as I rode north, and it covered the tracks of my horse, and the land went clean and white and unbothered in every direction, and somewhere back there behind the red ridge, from on 300 acres of hard-won Wyoming grass, a woman with green eyes stood at her kitchen window and watched the storm pass. I hope she's standing somewhere warm today. I hope the door found her. Cole Walker, Wyoming Territory, winter of 1883. If this story moved you, subscribe to the channel and tell us what city you're watching from in the comments below. We read every single one and drop a heart on each comment. More Old West stories are waiting for you right here. See you on the next one.